Stuart. Thanks for asking me to speak today. So, as you said, I am a Cahir Physiotherapist and I work in care in South Tipperary. So, farmers and their families make up a massive portion of our typical client list that we see every day. And over, I suppose, the last few years, we notice some similar recurring injuries coming in among these people on a fairly regular basis. And it's due to the work that they do in farming, and in particular work in the milking process. So like Padraig has spoken about there, the repetitive nature of the work and the speed that everyone is trying to achieve at it as well does tend to cause some problems as people are going through the process. So it's just to be mindful of maybe how we can make changes in the process and see if we can do something in your day that's going to make you better able to keep doing it for longer and do it without pain and without injury. So I suppose it was new to me to learn that just how often the clusters have changed, the amount of movement that happens in the parlour. Not from a farming background, I've learned this, I suppose, from farmers that I've spoken to daily. So doing something twice a day for 300 or more, for many of you, 300 days a year, is obviously going to lead to a repetitive type of injury, and those injuries we see all through the body. And I think as physios, the important thing for us to do is to give you strategies that you can use during your day, because all of you are busy and terribly busy at times of the year, so there isn't much time to be adding more into your routine. So we're looking at ways of making small changes in your routine and eking out little minutes to do some exercises that are going to make things better for you. So I suppose, like Padraig said, shoulder injuries are common, and overuse injuries in the shoulder are common, given that people do tend to use a one-handed approach in the parlour. So we have looked at the advice that you've given around switching hands in the parlour. So we tend to try and get farmers who are presenting into us to do, like Stuart showed, using their right hand for cows on the left-hand side of the parlour and their left hand holding the cluster for cows on the right-hand side of the parlour. And it is hard to get used to that change in routine, and any change in muscle use is difficult. But it is all about practice, and with any muscle, the muscle learns to work in the most effective manner that it can. So practicing that really does make an awful lot of difference. So we see farmers typically coming
Caroline,
yeah? Yes, Stuart?
is it going to be likely that we say that you're actually going to possibly incur some muscle pain in the process of switching over because of training the muscle again,
yes,
like any training?
Yeah, that's very possible. So sometimes people would find, like Padraig said, that it slows them up, and then it also gives the other shoulder a niggle, because it's not like your other arm is doing nothing. So the other arm would have had a role in, stabilizing or changing. So it would have been doing other work. And now you're looking for it to now add into this changeover process, and it isn't strengthened for that. So every muscle benefits from practice. So that's why, a seasoned farmer can, work so well always using their right hand, because their right hand has really strengthened up for that. So when we get them to use their left hand, which mightn't be their strongest hand anyway, there would often be some soreness in that time. But with all muscles, the thing is if you can stretch them, actually, they're longer, they can work better. So keeping them stretched and keeping them moving is actually what will make them stronger. So practice of the work. But this is what we see a lot, is that physical work, and as you all know, as farmers, there's plenty of physical work available. That in itself isn't always enough to adequately prepare you for the work that you need to do. And on a day-to-day basis, you might get away with it with small niggles or little aches, but something different, some change in the parlour, if you slip or you reach a little bit more, that then can cause an injury. So that's why you need to kind of ready yourself for that. So by being able to use both hands, at least you're giving one side a break, both in the shoulder and in the back, because obviously you're leaning in as well when you're trying to change those clusters. So both of those things changing over allows both of those things to rest a little bit. We often see that people are, they don't have enough time to stretch their muscles. They're strong because they lift and they use them all the time, but they don't have enough time, or they feel they don't have enough time to stretch them and to loosen them out a little bit more. And now I think Padraig and yourself are probably eliminating this downtime in the parlour that we like to give tasks to farmers to, but we see that there's minutes, 2 or 3 minutes at a time, while you're working, you're not actually using your hands maybe at that time, and you might have a moment, you know, we'd often get farmers to reach up on the bar overhead, stretch out a little bit there, just really try and open up the shoulders, stretching overhead, stretching behind as well, using bars that you can hold on to really stretch. And then when you come in, simple things like a resistance band. So those elastic bands you often see, you know, they're in the sport shop, they're in Lidl and Aldi from time to time. Those resistance bands are really useful, tied on somewhere in the kitchen while you're waiting for the kettle to boil at breakfast time. You have time where you can do some repeated strengthening exercises there. So that's strengthening the muscle, but not doing the very same exercise that you've been doing all day long. So it stops the repetitive nature of that. The shoulder as well struggles a lot from our posture and our neck. And for most of us, physios, farmers, for many of us, we work in front of ourselves. So when you're reaching, and I mean, we're talking about that movement into the cluster, you're reaching forward with both your hands. So really shortening here between the shoulders and overstretching, bringing those shoulders forward. That leads to a lot of shoulder pain around the back, pain up into the back of the head, pain up into a headache. So watching your posture will make a big difference there. And that can start on the easy times. That can start when you're reading the paper, when you're watching TV, when you're on your phone, just not to be head down, shoulders rounded, you know, trying to sit up tall, bring your head up, pull back the shoulders, bring your paper up higher, bring your phone up higher, watching your position. And in the parlour then, in these tiny minutes of downtime that you have, fixing your posture again. So when you come up from attaching a set of clusters and you have that minute, taking time just to pull your shoulder blades back together and really stretch out the back of the shoulders, that all makes a big difference in, you know, just stopping the same movement from happening over and over again. So I suppose shoulders are a big thing, but you'll never get a physio who doesn't talk about low back pain. So low back pain, we can all identify with it. So farmers will complain of that tired, achy back in the evening from a busy day, or, you know, it can go from there then to maybe an acute injury, sharp pain, pain that's stopping you from working comfortably or indeed working at all, which is the ultimate disaster. And recent studies show that 40% of farmers report low back pain, and that's in comparison with 20% of people of the same age in different occupations. So it does show that, you know, farming and the whole process of farming is hard on the lower back, and it's a part of our body that we really need to mind. So farmers typically have these lovely, strong, stiff backs, and that's not necessarily a bad thing at all. Those backs, they manage fine, they can work, they can do all the things that they need to do, but it's in times of extra effort and maybe when there's extra stresses on the body that you can be let down. So if you're calving, for example, and maybe your lack of sleep and, you know, in really awkward positions, that's a time when your back can cause some back pain. And springtime isn't a time for injury at all. There's no time for injury, but it's neither is it a time for taking on a new regime or a new exercise program. So this time of the year, kind of this autumn winter time, is when we suggest to our farmers to, you know, start getting spring ready, planning forward and thinking about what they can do to improve their overall health and improve the strength and condition of their back during this autumn winter time, when in fact they might be a little bit quieter than normal. I suppose we know that farmers now aren't as physically active as they would have been years ago. So quad bikes have reduced the amount of walking that they're doing. General machinery has reduced some of the physical load. But that doesn't take away then for, in really busy times, that extra physical effort that is needed. So it's to be fit for that. And we're seeing increasing obesity rates in farmers, and a lot of that is due to the lack of physical exercise that's been done anymore. And it's always hard, you know, I see farmers, you know, rolling their eyes at me when I say, you know, you need to be taking a bit of exercise. And they're like, I'm on my feet all day, you know, but it's different. Being on your feet and exercising are two different things. So we talk about needing some sort of cardiovascular exercise. And by cardiovascular, all I mean is something that gets your heart pumping and gets you breathing a little bit heavier. So you'd want to be able to hold a conversation, but maybe not a debate or a good conversation. You need to be a little bit breathless, taking in some small little bit of exercise. That might be that you can fit a walk or a run into your day, or as many of the farmers here say, that they're on their feet enough, so something like cycling or swimming is much better. Actually, here in Cahir, we have a great number of farmers coming into Pilates classes because they're getting their exercise and they're really strengthening up their backs, ready for spring. They disappear then in February, and we hear from them again around September, October, when they're ready to do another little bit. And any type of class exercise or a group exercise, so hurling, football, squash, tennis, whatever, anything where you're meeting up with a group has benefits then, of course, for your motivation, you will keep going, but really benefits in your physical health and your mental health as well, which is really important in farmers. You know, you need to be physically well, you need to be mentally well as well, and able for the stresses and challenges that come your way throughout the year. So in terms of specific for your back then, you know, again, you know, a couple of minutes of rolling down to your toes, arching your back backwards, even while standing. So in between a job, if you can just roll your body down gently to your toes, or stand up tall, hands on your hips and lean backwards, opening up the spine a little bit. Throughout the day, stops that stiffness setting in. Again, in bed in the morning with your knees bent, just rolling your knees side to side and getting that lovely twist into your spine, because sometimes we think of the spine as being this rigid, you know, solid bar in our backs, and actually it's designed to move, and the more that we move it, the better it's going to be. In terms of lifting as well, so farmers lift an awful lot, and again, that varies throughout the year. So you've got periods where you're not lifting anything that's excessive, and then other periods where you might be repeatedly lifting something that's a little heavy for you. So proper lifting technique. And one thing I really want to emphasize is that proper lifting technique isn't a straight spine at all. So there's 32 bones in your spine. They're designed all to move. So bending of the spine is really good. It's really natural and it's really useful. But where we want the power to come from then are from our leg muscles. So bending your knees, bending at the hip, that allows those big bum glute muscles, the muscles around the knee, to help. So they give the power. But the bend and the movement is really great to come from your back, but just that you're not relying on your back muscles to pull you all the way back up off the floor again. So using the hip and knee muscles at that time is really beneficial. Hip and knees, I suppose, are the next thing that we tend to see a couple of repetitive injuries coming in farmers. So we frequently see hip and knee pain. You know, you're on your feet all day, you're in wellies, you're on uneven ground. Lots of farmers have that habit of, you know, hopping out of machinery, landing maybe on one foot, or, you know, always throwing the leg out, in and out, throwing the same leg out of the door of a tractor or a machine. So they start to see some wear and tear on the hip and knee. I suppose in general, when we see hip pain in farmers, they do tend to be the older farmers. So you're wanting to look at giving them an exercise that's going to take them off their feet a little bit. So an exercise bike is, you know, they're commonplace actually in lots of farmer sitting rooms. So for 20 minutes in the evening, hopping up on the exercise bike just keeps the hip and knee moving, and yet you're not loading the joints like you would be on your feet. And again, swimming, please God, when the pools reopen, we can all get back into pools. So those kind of things, just to take a little bit of stress off the hip. The hip of an older farmer does have a little bit more arthritis than we typically see, and 1 in 5 farmers will end up with a hip replacement. So we're trying to stave off those things for as long as possible. And, you know, some of these injuries, certainly the knee injuries we see in farmers most often are sports injuries, to be honest, either recent or new or old sports injuries, depending on when you last played sport. So those things, you'll exacerbate them because you're on your feet so much. So keeping the hip and knee moving really well. And again, this downtime in the pit, you know, we've our farmers squatting, split squatting, lunging in the parlour, just anything to keep those muscles working. So again, you want to be working at a level that the muscle knows it's working, it knows it's done a little bit, and you're using that time effectively.
Okay.
So, I suppose I'm
contrary
time now. So I think the take-home messages that I have for you are, you know, to move more, use this autumn winter time to be ready for spring. And like 30 minutes of exercise a day is perfect. And if you aim for it every day, and if you can hit it 5 days a week, you will really be doing super. Get used to listening to what your body is saying. So the general advice I give to somebody is, if it feels tight, then stretch it. If it feels stiff, move it. Strengthen something that feels weak. So listen to your own body, do those movements. Exercise in a group where possible, because it's good for so many other facets as well as just that joint itself. And, you know, manage your sleep, manage your stress, and just keep that body moving. And remember, the body is designed to move, so move it as much as you possibly can.
Very good, Caroline. Thanks a million. Just one quick question, I suppose, before we let you go, because I'm conscious you have an appointment now at 11:15. So the choice of footwear, as you said, Wellingtons aren't probably the best footwear to be wearing, but in terms of actually investing in the footwear that people do invest in?
Yeah, and I think that's probably a big change in farming in recent years, where we understand that it's important to invest in footwear. I suppose it's like the tyres for a car, really. If you have good footwear on, so you need to be in a welly. You just need to make sure that it's as supportive as it can possibly be. You're looking for support under the arch of your foot, plenty of cushioning around the heel as well, because when you're jumping and landing out of a machine, you can tend to take a little bit of pressure onto the heel, and we see lots of farmers interested with heel pain, which is problematic when you're on your feet all day. So making sure that they fit you well, making sure as well that when the support has gone out of them, that you're reinvesting. So they might look fine, but the amount, the mileage that you're covering in those wellies, they won't last as long as your Sunday shoes. So therefore it's important that you are changing them when the support has gone out of them. Even simple things like making sure your socks are fitting well, so your toes aren't scrunched up when you're in the boot, and changing into other boots then if you're doing a job that doesn't require the welly, into another boot that's more supportive. If you're walking up in a field or something, you can have a boot on that's more, supportive around the ankle, so that you're not getting a wobbly ankle on some uneven ground.